homelessness. It's a huge story, an ongoing story. Thursday, I was out covering an interesting development, which is the use of what's called master leasing. LA County and LA Homeless Services Authority, which is this massive LA County, LA City organization which administers homeless funding. They lease entire buildings now. They make an entire building available for homeless housing as opposed to leasing individual units in a motel or individual apartments, which is one of the strategies to get more people off the streets in larger numbers and faster. And the day that I was doing that, Governor Newsom came out with an executive order directing officials to start removing homeless encampments, in particular from state property, say freeway on-ramps. And then the next headline was outrage from homeless advocates and elected officials. So with me today is Larry Slade. Larry is an attorney. He's also a very active member of the influential Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association, where he runs the homelessness committee there. And he and I have spoken about this issue many times for stories that I've done on Fox 11. Larry, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
What is the takeaway on this executive order from Newsom?
Well, the executive order comes on the heels of the Supreme Court's recent decision in the Grants Pass case, which overturned a former law that was in place, which determined that it is a violation of the Eighth Amendment's prohibition against cruel and unusual punishment to forcibly remove the homeless from the street.
Right.
Thereby basically finding a constitutional right to either be homeless unless you can find a bed to put them in.
Right.
Well, in the Grants Pass case, the Supreme Court said, no, that's not a violation of the Eighth Amendment, and municipalities are allowed to remove people from the street to protect the health and safety and welfare of the community.
Right.
And so this is Governor Newsom saying, I'm embracing that order, and I'm executing that Supreme Court decision, and I'm issuing an executive order that says, I want these people removed from the streets and as a partial solution to the problem. The problem is it's somewhat toothless because he can't force the municipalities to do it. As you indicated, he can only control state property.
So the question becomes then, where do they go?
Well, that's exactly right. And so people that object to this, that are outraged, the homeless advocates, they're saying that this decision essentially criminalizes homelessness.
Right.
That homelessness is not an intentional crime. It's a status crime. You don't have a roof over your head. And now the Supreme Court says that the city of LA, as an example, can find that you are violating the law and put you in jail or remove you from point A to point B. What it doesn't do is create any solutions to the problem. And a lot of people argue is that it just exacerbates the problem that already exists.
Do you argue that?
I do. I think that it does. It may exacerbate the problem that exists, but I think that it brings to bear an essential rebalancing of the rights between the people that live in the community, the homeowners and the renters, the stakeholders in a community, and people who come in and live on the streets of that community and are homeless. I think that the balance was way in favor of the homeless over the last couple of years, and that's why we've seen that imbalance. I think this corrects that somewhat, and so I support it. I think it's a good idea. I support what Governor Newsom is doing. I just recognize that it's not a solution.
Which Governor Newsom recognizes also. I mean, I've interviewed him on this subject. I've covered events with him on this subject. I mean, certainly he understands, and anybody would understand that simply moving somebody from point A to point B is not a solution. The solution is more housing, which takes forever to build and costs a fortune. The solution is to prevent people from falling into homelessness in the first place, which is tough when rents are $5,000 a month and minimum wage is what it is and inflation is what it is. So, I mean, are we going to have the same discussion 5 years from now, Larry, 10 years from now?
Oh, I don't know. It's a good question. And one of the things I've been wondering about is the government really equipped to try to resolve this problem? So I think we're all moving in the right direction by throwing resources at it, by having our elected officials focus intensely on it, by having the law overturned to empower local municipalities to enforce the health and safety laws, which are you can't sleep in my driveway, you can't defecate in front of my business, like that. Now the police are empowered to be able to enforce those health and safety laws. The question is, are elected officials who oppose the Supreme Court's finding and Governor Newsom's executive order, are they going to carry this out and enforce it, or are they going to say it's not a solution, we're going to ignore it? That remains to be seen.
Yeah, and you know what's so frustrating with me? And you remember the story that we covered on Fox 11? One of our great reporters, Gina Silva, did it with you about, I believe it was a woman that was on the street in Sherman Oaks refusing help. And at one point, I think, threw like human waste at people or at police officers. And it took that to get them to take her into custody. I presume it was under the 5150, which is if you're unable to care for yourself. I mean, the frustrating thing is that for a homeowner such as yourself or a business owner or residents, they see a human being in crisis on the street, and there's really, short of calling 911, which is not appropriate, you're almost powerless, aren't you?
Yes, not only are the community members almost powerless, but until recently, and maybe even persisting, the police are somewhat powerless. And one of the reasons why they're reticent to get involved with trying to police the homeless problem is because they're without the resources and the tools that they need to enforce the law. So there's been this standoff, this détente between the city essentially and the homeless, and saying, look, we're going to do everything we can to try to get you a roof over your head, but in the meantime, it's okay for you to stay where you are. And what the community has said is, no, we want to have a roof. We're willing to help pay for it through our taxes and through bond measures. But no, it's not okay for you to live on my street. You can't. It's not safe. It's not sanitary. And you don't have a constitutional right to just plop yourself down wherever you want. So it's going to be interesting to see this confluence of events of extreme sensitivity and focus by elected officials, significant sums of investment from the federal and state government, and newly empowered law enforcement opportunities to be able to remove people from the street. I'm hoping it's going to get a lot better now. I'm optimistic.
Well, I think you would agree with me that it has gotten better by some degree under L.A. Mayor Karen Bass and her Inside Safe program. The county has a similar program called Pathway Home. It just may be, Larry, that we've talked about this before. The problem is too big to solve. It's too big to solve unless we make major changes in society, and then we get this massive influx of housing, which is not really happening in scale, as to use one of the popular terms.
Yeah, it's not like a math problem where you can come up with a formula and then solve for X. I don't think that a solution, quote unquote, can be found, but certainly we can continue to mitigate the impact it's having on the homeless themselves, who are the people that have the most profound experience of this, as well as those in the community. And I concur with you that the mayor of Los Angeles has been hyper focused on it, and I think she's making an impact. As are, I think, our local council member, Nikki Rahman, is very focused on it. We sometimes disagree on how to get from point A to point B, but we're rowing in the same direction.
All right, Larry, I'm going to leave it at that, my friend. Thank you so much for your insight. Thanks for all the good work that you do and all the folks that work on behalf of community organizations like the Sherman Oaks Homeowners Association. It can be frustrating, but the alternative of giving up is just not really a viable option. Not if you want to be a responsible citizen in Southern California and